Does it hurt when your children pull away and stop visiting? Of course it hurts. What you cannot do is turn that pain into pursuit, into reproach, into that desperate need to beg for attention, as if your dignity had to ring their doorbell just to be let in. Because when a father or mother loses their center out of fear of abandonment, they stop acting from love and start moving from lack, and that brings no one closer. It only wears down what was already wounded. Stay with me. Gabriel here. Welcome to the Stoic Garden. Today we are going to walk through 8 tough, calm and deeply necessary points to face this distance from your children with a clear head, reclaim your place without dragging yourself, and rebuild a life with more peace, more respect and more inner strength. And it is worth staying until the end, because the last point does not just change how you look at this absence, it changes the way you are going to live this stage of your life. Let us begin. 1. Accept reality without dramatizing it, and stop chasing them with anxiety. The first thing you need to understand is this: your children pulling away does not automatically mean you no longer matter to them, but it does mean something changed, and continuing to deny it will only sink you deeper. Some parents turn distance into a 24-hour mental soap opera. Maybe they do not love me anymore. Maybe they forgot about me. Maybe after everything I did. And while they keep repeating that script, they start calling too much, texting too much, demanding explanations as if insistence could manufacture closeness. That is not calm love. That is anxiety disguised as affection, and it shows. It shows in the endless message nobody asked for, in the late calls spoken in a victim's tone, in that habit of checking the phone as if it were a monitor for emotional vital signs. The problem is that the more you chase from anguish, the more you teach the other person that with you there is no peace, only pressure. And nobody runs toward pressure. People avoid it. Your children do too. Accepting reality does not mean saying it does not hurt. Of course it hurts. But one thing is to feel the blow and another is to build an altar to suffering. That is where many people get lost. They confuse pain with the right to invade. They confuse sadness with permission to manipulate. They confuse having given their life for a child with the fantasy that this child now owes them immediate presence, total availability, and emotional obedience until the end of time. It does not work that way. It never did, no matter how much some people love telling themselves that story. Epictetus, who taught philosophy the way someone teaches you to stop making an inner fool of yourself, said that it is not events that disturb people, but the judgments they form about them. And he was right. The fact is that today your children are far away or visit less. That is the fact. Everything else is the movie you project onto it, that they hate you, that they are punishing you, that you are a burden, that everything is lost. Do you see the disaster? The problem does not begin with the distance. It begins when your mind turns that distance into a sentence. Ask yourself something uncomfortable. When they do not call, are you worried about them? Or about the wound it causes to your ego? Because those are not the same thing. Sometimes you do not even miss your children. You miss the role they played in your need to feel needed. And that stings, because it forces you to admit that we do not always cry out of pure love. Sometimes we cry because we lost control, importance, or habit. And yes, that happens in families too, even if some people like pretending otherwise. That is why the first act of dignity is to stop the pursuit. Do not send 5 messages in a row. Do not call 3 times in one afternoon. Do not send indirect little jabs wrapped in, "I just wanted to check on you." Do not use illness, guilt, or past sacrifice as emotional bait. If you want to get your center back, you have to stop moving like someone afraid of being abandoned and start moving like someone who knows how to hold themselves up. Calm here is not coldness. It is emotional hygiene. It is stopping yourself from dirtying the relationship with your desperation. Seneca warned that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and that fits this moment perfectly. Because maybe the distance is real, yes, but the hell you have built around it may be something you created alone, brick by brick, with anticipation, imagined offenses and scenes repeated in your head. Meanwhile, your life drains away in a mental hallway where no one comes to hug you because no one can get in there. You lock that room yourself from the inside. So do this immediately. Breathe. Accept the fact without dressing it up as tragedy. Stop chasing. Recover your composure. Give reality space to show itself as it is, not as your fear screams that it is. Because as long as you keep running after them with your heart in your throat, You are not going to get closer to your children. You are going to get farther away from yourself. And a person who loses themselves because they cannot tolerate distance eventually becomes someone who is hard to approach too. 2. Take an honest look at the relationship and recognize your part without punishing yourself. After accepting reality comes the part almost nobody wants to touch, because here you can no longer keep pretending you were completely innocent. If your children pulled away, there may be 1,000 reasons, yes. Their jobs, their partners, their problems, their own emotional limitations. But there may also be things in you that pushed that distance. And looking at that takes more courage than crying silently while staring at your phone. A lot of parents love repeating that they gave everything. Fine. The question is not only how much you gave, but how you gave it. Because you can give a lot and give it badly. You can help by humiliating. You can protect by suffocating. You can advise by controlling. You can love by invading. Some parents did not listen, they only corrected. Parents who called constant supervision concern. Parents who wanted grateful children, not free children. And when those children create distance, the offended parent acts surprised, as if decades of tension should have left no bill to pay. An honest review starts with dropping the act of the flawless martyr. No, you were not perfect. No one was. Maybe you criticized too much. Maybe you made hurtful comparisons. Maybe you demanded emotional loyalty as proof of love. Maybe you stepped in where you were not invited and then felt offended when they pushed back. Maybe you turned every conversation into a judgment, a complaint, or a lecture, and then you still wonder why some people prefer distance over a Sunday visit. Well, it was not exactly a sacred mystery. Now there is a dangerous trap here. Recognizing your part does not mean crushing yourself inside. It does not mean going from "I did nothing wrong" to "I ruined my children's whole lives." That is also ego, just wearing the clothes of penance. Excessive guilt still puts you at the center of everything. And no, not everything revolves around your mistakes. Your children also have character, wounds, choices, clumsiness, and responsibilities. This is not about emotionally whipping yourself until you look noble. It is about seeing clearly what depends on you and what does not. Arian wrote down that Epictetus kept saying you make progress when you blame others less and examine your own judgments more. There is the key. Examining is not destroying yourself. Examining is looking without makeup. It is saying, here I was wrong, here I was unfair. Here I did not know how to support them. Here I reacted from my fear. Here I turned my need into a demand. And after seeing it, instead of turning that discovery into another endless drama, you turn it into mature responsibility. Ask yourself concrete questions. When they spoke, did your children feel heard or judged? When they told you something difficult, did you receive them, or did you immediately give them a lecture? When they did not do what you expected, did you respect their path? Or did you punish them with coldness, disappointment, or silence? These questions are not here to destroy you. They are here to pull you out of self-deception. Because a parent who does not examine their role usually repeats the same dynamics and then complains about the same result, as if life were obligated to reward blindness. It is also worth asking whether you have used the past as a weapon. That, after all I did for you, has destroyed more bridges than many people dare to admit, because it turns love into an invoice. And love, when it is used like a bill waiting to be paid, stops being refuge and becomes pressure. Your children do not need an emotional accountant reminding them of every sacrifice. They need, while there is still a chance for connection, a presence that feels lighter, less accusatory, and cleaner. The most decent thing you can do at this point is own your part firmly and without melodrama, not to drown in guilt, but to break the pattern. To stop being the same person who creates tension and then begs for closeness. Because when you stop punishing yourself and start correcting yourself, something truly changes. And only then does a real possibility appear, rebuilding from a different place, not from wounded pride or sticky guilt, but from a truth that is more adult and more useful. 3. Send a short, dignified message without reproach and leave the door open. After reviewing your part, do not make the mistake of sitting down to write a 6-paragraph emotional will, full of wounds, selective memories, and that sad poetry that only tires the other person out. If you are going to reach out to a distant child, do it like someone with a center, not like someone who has just lost their inner balance completely. Brief, clear, clean, no stabs wrapped in tenderness, No passive poison that starts with "I do not want to bother you" and ends up charging for 20 years of frustration. A dignified message does not demand, beg, or manipulate. It says what is necessary and steps back. Something simple, human, without dramatic dressing. That you are there. That you recognize there may have been mistakes. That you wish them well. That the door is open to talk when they want to. Nothing more. You do not need to add that you feel lonely, that the house is empty, that no one remembers you anymore, that at this rate they will find you mummified next to the phone. Maybe that helps you vent for 5 minutes, but it does not build a bridge. It builds guilt, and guilt rarely brings people closer. It usually drives them away. Many people ruin this moment because they want to be right. They are not trying to reconnect. They are trying to win the moral case. They want to send a message that sounds noble on the surface but makes it crystal clear that the other person was unfair, ungrateful and cruel. And that is when the festival of elegant reproach begins. I just wanted to tell you I miss you, although I understand you now have more important things. Very refined. A dart wearing perfume. Do not worry. I'm already used to not hearing from you. Wonderful. Then they wonder why they get no reply. What an unfathomable mystery. Marcus Aurelius, who carried an empire on his shoulders without turning every annoyance into a performance, wrote to remind himself that he had to act with integrity, not resentment. And that fits you perfectly here. Your message should not come from the wound. It should come from character. Because when you write from resentment, even if you try to hide it, it shows in every word. The other person can feel it. No one needs a sophisticated detector to smell an emotional ambush. Think carefully about what you are looking for. Do you really want to open a door, or do you want to put the other person on trial? Because those are different things. An open door invites without invading. A courtroom demands defense, explanation, and guilt. And if your child is already tired, confused, or defensive, what do you think they are going to choose? Exactly. Distance. Not because they are a monster, but because almost nobody willingly walks into a place where they know they will be met with unresolved accounts and the stare of a prosecutor. That is why the right message has a quiet strength. It does not beg for an immediate response. It does not ask why they pushed you aside as if you were a private investigator in crisis. It does not demand an urgent meeting to clear everything up once and for all. It leaves space, and leaving space is not giving up. It is showing that you still know how to respect the other person's pace, even when that pace makes you uncomfortable. That is maturity. That shows whether you really want to care for the bond or just calm your own anxiety. And pay attention to something else. After sending that message, be quiet. Do not send another one to confirm whether they read it. Do not add a sad emoji the next day. Do not invent a ridiculous excuse to get back in. Sorry, I texted the wrong chat. Sure, a cosmic coincidence. When you say the door is open, act like someone who can leave it open without standing in the doorway staring to see whether anyone comes in. That communicates something too. It communicates steadiness, respect, and self-control. Sometimes that message does not bring an immediate reply. Sometimes it brings none at all. And even then, doing it the right way still matters. Because it takes you out of the role of pursuer, breaks the cycle of reproach, and gives you back a cleaner kind of presence. You are no longer someone throwing emotional hooks into the water to see whether you can catch a little attention. You are someone who spoke with dignity and stopped dragging your need across the floor. And believe me, painful as it is to admit, that is worth more than many long conversations full of words that only make everything worse. 4. Set clear limits on disrespect and cut off emotional blackmail immediately. Now then, it is one thing not to chase, and something very different to accept any kind of treatment just so you do not lose contact. This is where many parents make a humiliating mistake. Because they are afraid the child will disappear completely, they tolerate contempt, shouting, mockery, cruel indifference, or self-serving visits where you only matter when money, favors, or problem-solving are needed. And they accept all of it just so they can feel they are still present in the child's life. That is not a relationship. That is emotional begging in a family uniform. Setting limits is not about fighting out of pride. It is about reminding the other person and reminding yourself that love does not cancel out respect. If your child speaks to you with contempt, if they call only to dump their poison on you, if they manipulate you with threats of distance every time you do not do what they want, you need to stop that immediately. not with hysterical shouting, not with theatrical speeches, not with the classic scene of "after everything I did for you." With firmness, with few words, with a calm tone. You do not speak to me like that here. Guilt is not used here to control me. I do not negotiate through mistreatment. And yes, this is deeply uncomfortable for parents who have spent years confusing love with unlimited tolerance. Because in their minds, being a good father or good mother means enduring everything, always giving in, understanding everything, justifying everything, as if virtue meant becoming a doormat. But no, patience without dignity degrades quickly. Understanding without limits turns into complicity. And when you tolerate emotional blackmail once, twice, 10 times, you teach the other person that this method works with you. Then do not cry when they keep using it. You train that monster yourself. Here it is worth pausing and asking yourself something that stings. Would you rather have a relationship that is infrequent but respectful, or frequent closeness built on humiliation? Many people say they want peace, but when the time comes to choose, they prefer noisy crumbs over silence with dignity. They accept a hurtful call just to feel that at least there was a call. They accept an uncomfortable visit just so they can say the person came. They accept being spoken to like a burden, just so they do not have to face the emptiness. And that is when the soul starts to shrink. Musonius Rufus, a Stoic teacher and not exactly a fan of weaknesses disguised as virtue, insisted that the good life requires integrity in everyday action, not pretty speeches. Here that means something very simple. You cannot keep calling love what is clearly disrespect. And you cannot pretend that everything will be fixed with endless patience while your dignity bleeds in silence. There are moments when the most loving act is not drawing closer, but stepping back from a sick dynamic until the other person learns to relate without using harm as a tool. Emotional blackmail comes in many forms. It does not always come with shouting. Sometimes it comes with calculated silence, veiled threats, favors that get charged back later, or that attitude of punishing you by withdrawing presence until you give in. Or with lines that are already tiring in their immaturity. If you are not going to do this, then why should I even reach out to you? And there you are, shaking inside, giving in again just so you do not lose contact. Do you see the price? You are not buying peace. You are renting a few minutes of presence in exchange for betraying yourself. That is why the boundary must be clear and without spectacle. You can say that you want to keep having a relationship, but not in just any way. You can say that you are willing to talk, but not to receive insults. You can say that you help when it comes from love and real possibility, not when someone pushes you with guilt. And then you hold it. Because there is no point in setting a brilliant boundary if at the first tear, the first threat, or the first desperate call you kneel emotionally all over again. A boundary that is not upheld becomes a joke, and you do not need to hand the circus any more material. There is something hard but freeing in all this. Some relationships improve when you stop rewarding bad behavior. Others do not, and you have to be able to tolerate both possibilities. Because if your boundary depends on the other person approving it, then it is not really a boundary. It is negotiation wearing makeup. You are doing it to see whether they will love you more, not because you have understood your own worth. But when you do it from real dignity, the message changes completely. I love you, but I will not let you use me, humiliate me, or bend me with guilt. That point is decisive. Because a parent with no limits ends up fostering, even in adulthood, relationships where respect is optional and guilt is the common currency. And no, you did not come to this stage of your life to be anyone's emotional dumping ground, not even your children's. You can love deeply and still shut the door on abuse. You can want closeness and refuse to accept indignity. In fact, that combination is far healthier than that old habit of tolerating everything out of fear of being left alone. Sometimes the real abandonment is not what they do to you. It is what you do to yourself every time you accept treatment that breaks you inside. 5. Stop depending on them emotionally and rebuild your routine with daily structure. Here we come to an uncomfortable but decisive point. There are parents who do not just miss their children, they depend on them emotionally to feel alive, valued, and accompanied. And when those children pull away, their whole world falls out of order because they had placed far too much weight on a single source of meaning. All their energy revolved around waiting for a call, a visit, a message, some proof of affection. There is no peace possible like that. That is living in the hands of someone else's calendar, someone else's availability, someone else's mood. Emotional dependence has a very cruel trap. At first it looks like deep love, natural closeness, family attachment, but when it becomes the absolute center of your life, it ends up devouring you. You no longer organize your days around what is good for you, but around whatever might bring you a little attention. You wake up wondering whether they will write today. You eat without hunger. You sleep badly. You cancel your own plans just in case they call. And meanwhile, your life grows smaller, quieter, and sadder. Not because your children are far away, but because you stopped building something that could also hold you up outside of them. The way out here is not emotional first. It is practical. You need structure, and you need it quickly. Because when the mind is obsessed with an absence, the body and routine have to help rescue you. Get up at a fixed time. Walk. Put your space in order. Cook with intention. Make a simple task list. Read. Go out. Talk to someone. Take care of your responsibilities without waiting to feel like it. Daily discipline is not punishment. It is the scaffolding that holds a person up when their emotions become unstable ground. Many people reject this because it feels too simple. They want a great spiritual answer, a shining phrase, a solution that gives them peace without having to get up from the chair. But no. Sometimes the most philosophical thing you can do is make your bed, open the window, and pull your mind out of the swamp through concrete actions. Or did you plan to keep healing the emptiness by staring at the ceiling and replaying conversations from 5 years ago? Magnificent plan for destroying yourself methodically. The Stoics understood something many people forget today. The soul is also educated through habits. Seneca insisted that life falls into disorder when a person does not govern themselves. And governing yourself here means something very humble and very powerful at the same time. Not letting your emotions alone decide what your day will look like. Not handing them the wheel completely because a wounded emotion wants stillness, rumination, drama, waiting. A well-structured life, by contrast, begins to remind you little by little that there is still solid ground beneath your feet. Ask yourself with brutal honesty, who are you when no one calls? That question carries weight because it forces you to look at the emptiness you may have spent years avoiding. If your whole identity had shrunk into being the parent who was available, needed, consulted, visited, then this distance leaves you facing a mirror that does not forgive. But it also offers you a rare and valuable opportunity, the chance to rebuild yourself without that old consuming role. The chance to inhabit your time again as a whole person, not as a waiting room with legs. Your daily routine has to become your ally against the fantasy that you will only be okay when your children return to the kind of relationship you miss. Maybe they will return, maybe they will not, maybe it will be in a different way. But you cannot freeze until then. You cannot put your energy, your house, your meals, your body, your mind on pause as if your life were an unplugged appliance. That does not honor love, it honors dependence. Start small, but start seriously. You do not need a military-style schedule to feel dignified again. You need simple, steady commitments. Basic hours, movement, order, meaningful tasks, time without your phone in your hand. Less emotional surveillance and more real presence in your own day. Because as long as you keep orbiting around an absence, you will keep feeling empty. But when you begin to organize yourself, even while the pain is still there, something important happens. You are no longer just someone waiting. You start becoming someone living. And that changes much more than you imagine. A person who rebuilds their routine stops radiating desperation. They stop speaking from the void and begin speaking from firmer ground. Dependence begins to lose strength. The bond with their children, if it resumes, no longer becomes life support. And you, at last, recover something you may have quietly given away years ago. The right for your life to have shape, value, and direction, even when they are not near. 6. Take care of your health and your energy as a priority so you do not live from lack. There are people who, when they feel their children pulling away, begin abandoning themselves with almost professional dedication. They eat worse, sleep worse, stop moving, isolate themselves more, complain more, and live drained on the inside. Then, they try to relate to others from that exhaustion and feel surprised when they sound needy, irritable, or defeated. Well, of course, a neglected body and broken energy do not usually produce calm presence. They usually produce anxiety, hypersensitivity, and that sense of begging for something to soothe the emptiness. Taking care of yourself is not a secondary detail or a luxury, or a pretty recommendation to fill a notebook of inspiring quotes. It is an obligation. Because when your health declines, your mind exaggerates more, your patience lasts less, and your dignity grows more fragile. Exhaustion turns any silence into rejection. Insomnia makes any delay feel dramatic. Poor nutrition leaves you without steadiness. A sedentary life traps you even further inside your thoughts. And then you say you are suffering because of the distance from your children, when part of that fire is also being fed by your own neglect. There is something here people do not want to hear. Not every emotional void is resolved by talking. Sometimes a big part of the distress improves when you start treating your body with a minimum of respect again. Sleeping better, drinking water, eating decently, walking every day, getting checkups, getting some light, breathing fresh air instead of shut-in air. It sounds basic, yes. That is exactly why it is so infuriating. Because many people want grand solutions while they are falling apart over basic things they have ignored for months or years. And no, I am not saying a walk replaces an emotional wound. Let us not simplify things like a cheap social media guru. I am saying an emotional wound becomes much harder to carry with clarity when you are also exhausted, inflamed, inactive, and living without any physical care. How could you not react from lack when everything in you is functioning on reserves? How could you not latch onto a call, a visit, or a message as if it were water in the desert if you have spent too long living in scarcity mode? Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that body and soul both had to do their work without whining like spoiled children. He was not soft. He knew that the discipline of self-care does not depend on mood, and that matters a great deal here. Because if you are waiting to feel motivated before you start taking care of yourself, you are already late. Real care begins when you do it even without desire, even while sad, even while disappointed. Not for appearances, not to impress anyone. But so you do not live emptied out. So you do not become a cracked vessel waiting for others to fill it. And when you take care of yourself, you send a powerful signal inward. You tell your whole system that not everything is lost, that you are still responsible for something important, that you are still worthy of attention even if your children are far away. That signal is gold, because it breaks a very destructive belief that you only deserve energy, enthusiasm, or affection when others validate you. No. You also deserve care simply because you are alive. And the sooner you understand that, the less dependent you will be on someone coming to rescue you emotionally. There is a sad irony in all this. Many parents did the impossible for years to care for others, and never learned to care for themselves without feeling selfish. They think exhaustion is noble. They think forgetting themselves is honorable. They almost see prioritizing their health as sinful, and so they arrive at a stage of life where they need strength, but all they have is wear and tear. They need clarity, but all they have is fog. They need calm presence, but all they have is frayed nerves. Then they wonder why everything hits them so hard, because you have spent too long living without any inner reserve. Put this in order immediately. Make your energy a priority, not as a temporary reaction, but as a new foundation. Cut back on what drains you. Take care of the medical issues you have been postponing. Move even when your mind protests. Eat like someone who wants to hold themselves up, not like someone who has already given up. Rest seriously. Reduce the excess screen time, rumination, and recycled complaint. Your system needs less punishment and more stability. Because a person who lives from lack clings, demands, falls apart easily and takes any crumb as salvation. A person who takes care of their health and energy, on the other hand, can feel pain without collapsing, can love without dragging themselves, and can go through distance without losing their center. That is what you need here. Not a perfect version of yourself, a stronger version, a cleaner one less hungry for approval. From there, your decisions change, your tone changes, and even the way others perceive you changes. And it all begins in something far less glamorous than many would like. Learning to treat yourself again like someone worth sustaining. 7. Strengthen your support system outside your children and choose company that adds peace. One of the most painful mistakes at this stage of life is having reduced your whole emotional world to your children, as if it were healthy for all your need for conversation, company, belonging, and human warmth, to rest on 2, 3, or 4 people who also have their own lives, their own messes, and their own limits. That is not an emotional foundation. That is monoculture. And any monoculture, when it fails, leaves the ground shaking. That is why you need to widen your circle. And not out of spite, not to pretend you no longer care, not to post a forced smile with a cup of coffee and some cheap self-help line. You need to do it because no human being should live depending on a single relationship to feel accompanied. Your children can be important, deeply important, but they cannot be your only source of contact, listening and presence. When you turn them into that, you place an unfair burden on them and leave yourself dangerously exposed. Strengthening your circle does not mean surrounding yourself with just anyone, so you do not feel alone. That also requires judgment. Because some company does not soothe, it contaminates. People who only want to feed gossip, bitterness and complaint. People who tell you exactly what you want to hear, so you stay trapped in the role of the glorified victim. Your children are ungrateful after everything you did. If I were you, I would never speak to them again. Wonderful. You leave that conversation with more poison than peace, but at least they applauded your wound. Great deal. You need a different kind of presence. People with whom you can talk without turning every meeting into an emotional funeral. Calm, honest people with some inner depth, able to listen without feeding your worst impulses. Company that does not use you, does not drain you, does not push you toward paranoia or resentment. Because yes, loneliness hurts, but bad company distorts you. And at this stage of life, you are no longer here to add noise just because you are afraid of silence. Here it is worth asking yourself something that may not feel pleasant. Have you isolated yourself too much over the years, expecting family to fill everything? Many people did. They stopped cultivating friendships, stopped showing up in places, stopped building ties of their own, because they thought their children would be enough. And now, all at once, they discover they built a life with very few side doors. But that can be corrected. Not with social desperation, not by becoming the kind of clingy person who attaches themselves to anyone, just so they do not have to eat dinner alone, but by gradually rebuilding a circle that is more adult and easier to breathe in. Hierocles, a lesser-known but very lucid Stoic, spoke about the circles of relationship that surround our lives and about the task of drawing closer to others in a fair and healthy way. It was not a cold idea, it was a practical reminder. You were not born to shut yourself into a single bond and abandon everything else. Human life needs community, conversation, exchange, witnesses. It needs a tribe, even a small one. And when that tribe is not cared for, the soul begins living in an unnecessary kind of exposure. Look for spaces where your presence has value beyond family ties. A group, an activity, a community, a friendship you reconnect with, a neighbor you can walk with, someone with whom you can share a clean conversation and not just recycled miseries. It is not about filling time for the sake of it. It is about rebuilding human fabric. Because when your emotional world expands, something shifts inside you. The anxiety goes down. Your perspective widens. The weight you had placed on the relationship with your children stops feeling so crushing. And here comes a truth that stings a little. Sometimes your children feel less pressure and draw closer when they stop sensing that they are your only emotional support. Of course, because you are no longer receiving them like someone waiting for oxygen in a bottle. Not every call now carries the weight of saving your week. Not every visit feels like an emotional survival exam. That relaxes the bond. It cleans it up. It removes that sticky tension many deny, but almost everyone can feel. So open up your life with judgment. Choose company that adds peace, not spectacle. People who return your humanity to you, not drama. And stop acting as if building new relationships were somehow a betrayal of your children or your story. It is not. It is emotional intelligence learned late, yes, but still welcome. Because when you strengthen your support system outside them, you are not replacing them. You are balancing yourself. And a balanced person loves better, expects less from lack, and stops turning every distance into a sentence of total abandonment. 8. Turn the distance into freedom and create purpose for this stage of your life. This last point is the hardest and at the same time the most liberating, because up to now we have talked about accepting, reviewing, communicating, setting limits, rebuilding routine, protecting your energy, and widening your circle. But now comes the big question. What are you going to do with this stage of your life besides suffer through it? Because if everything comes down to enduring the absence of your children, you are still trapped. Better organized, more dignified perhaps, but trapped all the same. And you did not come to this part of the road just to endure. You also came to discover what kind of life you can still create. Distance, hard as it is, brings a possibility many people do not see at first. It gives you back time, mental space, and room to choose. Yes, I know that does not sound poetic when the heart is hurting, but it is true. For years, perhaps, you lived focused on other people's needs, other people's schedules, other people's urgencies, with an identity completely absorbed by the role of father or mother. And now life, in a rough way, is asking you who you are when that role no longer takes up everything. That question is not here to destroy you, it is here to wake you up. Many people are afraid of this freedom because they do not know what to do with it. They would rather stay glued to nostalgia, grievance, or endless waiting than face the dizzying task of beginning something of their own. Because beginning something of your own is frightening. It forces you to leave the position of passive victim and step into that of author of a new stage. And once you do that, you can no longer blame the distance for every empty day. Then it is your turn to decide. Are you going to keep living off memories, or are you going to build a real reason to get up with purpose? Purpose does not mean doing something grand or turning into some epic version of yourself at 60, 70, or whatever age you are. It means directing your energy towards something worthwhile. Learning, serving, creating, teaching, caring for a garden, studying something you had left pending, writing, helping others, starting a small, meaningful routine, taking part more fully in a space that needs you, giving shape to days that do not depend on whether someone called you today. Purpose does not erase pain, but it makes it livable. It puts it in perspective. It stops letting it become the absolute owner of your inner house. Viktor Frankl was not a Stoic, but he understood something the Stoics would also have respected. The person who has a why can better endure many hows. And here that why matters enormously. Because without purpose, the distance from your children becomes a black hole. Everything falls into it. Your thoughts, your energy, your desire, your hours. But when your life begins pointing towards something, the wound still exists, but it no longer rules the whole board. There is a beautiful irony in this. You may have spent months or years seeing the distance only as loss, and without realizing it, it can also be a door. Not a door you chose to open, true, but a door nonetheless. A door toward a more sober, freer, less dependent version of yourself. A door toward an old age, with more center and less emotional begging. A door toward a life in which your children are an important part, yes, but not the exclusive axis around which your worth revolves. And here comes a question that deserves to stay lodged in your chest. When this stage ends, because every stage ends one way or another, do you want to look back and see that all you did was wait? That all you did was suffer? That you consumed yourself trying to recover an old version of the relationship? Or do you want to see that, in the middle of the pain, you were able to grow, refine your character, recover your dignity, and build a wider life? Your children do not decide that difference. You do. Marcus Aurelius repeated to himself that the task of a human being is to do well what lies in front of them, not to get lost fantasizing about some other scenario. And what lies in front of you today is not the ideal family you once imagined. It is this reality, this distance, this silence, this new distribution of affection. Fine, work with that, not against it. Make this stage a school of late maturity. Use solitude to know yourself better. Use the space to put your soul in order. Use the pain to strip away dramatics, dependencies, and old illusions that no longer serve you. Turning distance into freedom does not mean loving less. It means no longer living in chains. It means love no longer pushes you to chase, beg, or break yourself. It means you can love your children deeply and at the same time choose a life with its own meaning, its own projects, its own calm, its own direction. And when that happens, something immense changes. You no longer see this stage as a sentence. You see it as a transformation, a hard one, yes, but also one of those transformations that returns you to yourself with more truth, more steadiness, and more peace than you had before. If you made it this far, then you already understand something many people take years to accept. The pain of distance from your children is not resolved by chasing, dramatizing, or handing over your dignity in exchange for a few crumbs of attention. It begins to resolve when you accept reality, examine your part honestly, speak with respect, set limits, rebuild your life, and stop living as if your worth depended on someone knocking on your door or answering your message. That is maturity, that is character, and that, difficult as it is also love properly understood. Stoic philosophy did not come to tell you not to feel. It came to teach you not to fall apart over everything you cannot control. Your children will make their choices. They will have their timing, their mistakes, their distance, and their ways of loving. But you can still decide how you are going to stand in front of this stage of life. You can choose whether you become a wound that demands or a presence that keeps its center. You can stay tied to the emptiness or begin building a life that is more sober, stronger, and more your own. Now tell me in the comments which of these points hit you the hardest, because many times naming clearly what hurts is the first step toward no longer dragging it in silence. And if this video helped you see things with more calm, share it with someone else who is also going through this distance and does not know how to hold themselves together without breaking inside. Subscribe to the Stoic Garden to keep strengthening your character, recovering your peace, and learning to live with more dignity, even when life presses where it hurts the most. We are not here to sugarcoat reality. We are here to face it head-on, to put ourselves in order inside, and to become people who are steadier, freer, and harder to tear down.